And there seems to be sound. Okay.
Yeah, very accepting now.
Oh, you do still have me. Huh, that's weird. Okay.
What we're largely talking about here is deed restricted to lower income housing. So this is housing that is designed to be affordable based upon how much money you make as an individual or as a family. All cities are required to actually plan for housing at all income levels. Their vehicle for that is regional housing needs assessment.
That isn't working for sound.
The housing element is a part of the general plan, from which particular document defines where certain land uses are allowed in the city and what policies help to create those land uses in given form. It matters for a whole bunch of reasons. It's how you shape the city physically. So while there is a gas station in one corner and a commercial strip mall in another, or a mixed-use building somewhere else in the city, or a whole bunch of single-family homes in another. Ultimately, what it does is it influences who's able to live here, because if you're not supplying enough homes and enough variety and types, then you are limiting the city to people with certain types of incomes. And state laws attempt to get around that and create a more inclusive environment for all people in all cities. So what they ask of all cities is to plan for that housing, and they do it on an 8-year basis. Next slide. The different income levels that you're required to plan for as a city are for very low, moderate, and above moderate income. Above moderate income is for market rate. That is just whatever there is in the public that is not deed restricted. In other words, there is not some part of the deed that has an element written into it saying this can only be sold at this value to this type of person, etc. The basic premise here is that if you are an individual or a household, you should only be paying up to 30% of your gross income on those costs. So, if you think about what a typical person makes now in Silicon Valley, that seems like a lot of money, but if you're looking at rents again, that one 225 square foot ADU is going for $1,800 a month. Almost everything else immediately thereafter is about $3,200 for a bedroom. That's really significant. It's more than a lot of people's mortgages. Next slide. This will give you the current table. So there's a lot of actuarial data that goes into this to figure out how much the area median income should be. When people talk about what the area median income is and they give you a dollar figure, it's always with reference to a 4-person household. So a family of 4 at area median income is making $168,500 a year. That's actually about $10,000 more than it was the year prior. So this number keeps going up. Next slide. This is the pay scale for the Fremont Union High School District, which is our local high school district. The very bottom of that is about $133,000, which tells you that a teacher making the maximum that you possibly can at FUHSD is definitely a low income individual in comparison to the general public. Next slide. So it matters for us in the same way that Peter was mentioning. Businesses see higher staff turnover when their workers have to commute in much further away. If you can find a job that doesn't require you to drive 3 hours somewhere, it's probably something that might be attractive to you. But it also affects our our own St. Jude's community, and it affects government services. So I think the most obvious one that you'll notice is recent school closures. That's not just a declining enrollment issue, it's also what we can afford to pay teachers in the area. It reduces our economic diversity, and obviously it creates economic strife at the end of the day. There are also some serious legal consequences for the city and municipalities in general if they don't plan properly at this point. These are revisions that occurred to the law in the last 5 years. This housing element has to be certified by a state entity, the Department of Housing and Community Development. If we don't have a state certified housing element, then there is a remedy built into the law that allows for a property owner to bring forward an application to build essentially at any residential density on any residential or commercially zoned site. That's pretty significant. So in essence, you lose a lot of local control. You also are cut off from a lot of funding sources for affordable housing because they think that you're not serious. And then there are other laws that are triggered by your production against the plan that you made, things like SB 45, and folks who should be familiar with that at this point. Next slide. So, what does this mean for St. Jude's? Well, we can help the city overcome some obstacles, and the community overcome some obstacles to building affordable housing because we've got land. As Peter mentioned, the biggest hurdle for most affordable housing projects is the cost of land. We have it, we have some extra, we can figure out if we want to do something useful with it for that purpose. We also get preferential tax treatment both on the basis of what would otherwise be income tax and property taxes. It makes it a lot easier for us to partner with nonprofits that have a similar situation. We had, in order to try to preserve this opportunity for ourselves, asked the city to be included in the site inventory for the housing element. This is not a legal obligation on us, so if we don't wind up doing anything, it's okay. There's nothing that happens to us, but it does create opportunities. Particularly if we want to proceed with doing something here on the site, we don't have as many legal barriers to it because the city had at that point told the state we're committed to trying to help this community make something happen. Like I said, it would help the city meet its planning obligations, but also help it meet its production obligations as we build. And you have the opportunity as a community to be an example, right? Because for other faith communities to try to do the same thing. Any question?
Joe, what is surplus land?
So surplus land is a term of art, it just means underutilized land. Right? So it doesn't mean that anything here is necessarily surplus, but parking lots are generally regarded as surplus if they're not being fully utilized, right? Lots of the state apparently is overparked. There is more parking in San Jose than there are metros. So it should give you some idea of that situation. We can go to the next. So why should this matter to St. Jude? Well, you've heard the bishop's call. We have some opportunity to reimagine parts of the campus that you might want to see invigorated with new facilities or changed in some way that is more meaningful to you. There's some opportunity for additional income depending on how we structure it. We can certainly solve some of our clergy housing woes. We definitely can solve a stronger sense of place because you'll participate in what the new structures look like. And we get to guide what kind of so we have much more direct influence on it. Next slide. So what do we challenge? What are we challenging? Some of it is what you would expect, what the neighbors think. This happens kind of everywhere, and Jennifer will go into that in greater detail. Other parts that we are on an unusual zoning designation. We are on land called quasi-public, and it contemplates a number of odd and somewhat flexible uses, but one of them is not necessarily affordable housing. It does allow for congregate housing. It really envisions things like monasteries and convents, but it doesn't talk about rectories for some reason. So you can get an idea of what the bias might have been there. So this is an opportunity by going through the housing element process to, at the cost of the city, recommending that the city rather than our own cost, to change what is legally permissible on site. So there's an enormous cost savings to us. This process is unfortunately very political. Fortunately for us, that process is behind. Unfortunately for the city, there are consequences for that. But it does mean that they should be more interested in wanting to work with the parish in order to make something happen. We are, like I said, a study that presumes a bunch of things about what we would do under state law and what we wouldn't do. So we have an ongoing conversation with city planners about how to invest in one like that. And I think that should be it. Next slide. Yes.
Going forward, the online approach we're having a hard time hearing, so it might be helpful if we held the microphone.
Hello.
That's it.
Okay. One thing I wanted to mention is that I have the website, I should probably help out. So I'll be putting the slides up on the website as well, so you'll be able to find them there. Thank you, Peter, and to share what they talk about. I'm going to talk about what have we learned from other local churches, because obviously they're our best comparison. What other churches have done. So next slide. So here's some recent projects at other churches. And as you can see, most of them are affordable housing. Some include clergy housing, some include rectory. And the reason we kind of focused on affordable housing was that that's the new part to us. And actually it's new to most of these congregations as well. We did some discovery work as well. Okay. We did some discovery work with developers as well. Developers are people who handle financing, construction. When I say financing, I mean grant funding and things like that. Financing, construction, usually work with a particular management company so that once the housing is built, affordable housing is built, not directly obviously, they handle tenant relations and services to the people that are living in that space. We also talked to architects, and Aaron has recently reached out to some Cupertino city departments as well, just to start building those relationships and learn from them and get more information before we even consider doing anything. So we're kind of doing our due diligence. And then last I wanted to mention these local organizations. As you recall, last fall we had a couple forums. These are organizations such as Destination Home and Life Moves that facilitate affordable housing. They don't actually develop and create the affordable housing, but they help with grant funding and they make it happen more than actually build structures and that sort of thing. Next slide. Great. So I'm going to talk a little bit now about the sample project that we've learned an awful lot about. They've been incredibly helpful talking with us about their experiences, and it kind of gives us some ideas about what kind of choices they made that may have an effect on as well. So this is Jordan Court. It's can you click on it? Okay. It includes 34 units of affordable studio apartments, all for seniors. So it's not a huge project. 34 pieces of the house is not enormous. However, it doesn't include any housing for families. It is literally for single people. But the nice part about it is it also includes clergy apartments. It's one large apartment that can be split into two, so you could actually have 2 apartments. But also includes multiple offices for staff and lay leadership, and some shared space between the residents that live there and the parish itself. So they have more interconnection between them, which was a desire of theirs. The land is on a 99-year lease. That's an option. Most of the parishes went ahead and leased the land. They did not sell it, but we could sell it. I don't think normally we were really thinking about that right now. As you can see, it's a $1 year lease, very little. Parish gets everything at the very end. And then, of course, an outside property management service handles all the rent and handles tenants and that sort of thing. So the parish is not, involved in who is actually renting the apartments at all. Part of the long-term cost capitalization was to build these new offices in the clergy housing. So that was all kind of part of it. There wasn't any outlay from the parish for this. What they were giving was their land. And except for there was a bequest, which is why it's called Jordan Court, because Ann Jordan, a former parishioner there, had a bequest for approximately $200,000 that covered upgrading the facilities, making the insides a little nicer, adding some landscaping that wasn't part of the base project. So just nice things to do. One thing, and Jared alluded to this, in Berkeley, the city council and the mayor, which is a strong mayor, if you've ever heard that term before, were very supportive. And they really helped make this project happen. As you know, here at Cupertino, right now, we don't really have it. But, you know, you never know what's going to happen down the road. So we obviously have a strong voice. And you know, we can work with sympathetic leadership here in the city. Last, they chose to match the exterior appearance of this to the neighborhood. They didn't choose to match it to their sanctuary and their buildings, which date from 1900 and are more arts and crafts style. So that was their choice. And it does suit the neighborhood quite nicely. They added those bay windows because otherwise it was a flat sided and they wanted something that looked a little more architecturally interesting. Next slide. So here's some discoveries. And I say discoveries because really what we found is a lot of options. They don't point to a specific way of doing something, it's more tailored to each individual parish. So that's kind of nice. One of the things is finances. You know, these are fell, I'm not going to read all these. But a key thing is that we don't anticipate any additional tax burden, which is a really nice thing. Residents, they can be determined by either the parish can say, we really are looking for this type of housing, or the developer, and then sometimes with the companies that help facilitate and say, you know, you'll get more grant money if you go this way. So there can be a variety of different ways. And then keep going. This is probably the one that I think most people are going to be really, really concerned about, which is, what does it look like? How big is it? Where is it going to fit? How is it going to fit with everything else that's going on in a particular parish? Things like that. Does it flow? Does it, is there that interconnectedness that a lot of parishes want between new residents and the parish? So this is something that usually involves a lot of the information. And then last, on the page, other things that can be added. As I mentioned, in Berkeley, they had additional clergy housing, and they had, not new outer space with the labyrinth in it, and they also included meeting space, offices, etc. So that can be part of the project.
Did they buy that land at some point?
The land was already there. It was already theirs. It's not like us. It was a parcel. That's what they had all along. And there was a derelict building on it at the time for a long time, which I don't really know what was originally clergy housing. Do you remember what it was? Like parish offices, yeah, but it was quite derelict.
It was bequeathed to them something.
Yeah, back when they became a parish, like, they had it all along. It wasn't like something they purchased or anything like that.
For example, just like here, they had a parcel, a smaller parcel.
It's an example as we have here. They had a smaller parcel, we didn't. This is 3 acres. There's something less than that. They owned this, and it was just contiguous to their sanctuary.
Yeah, it was right next to it, so it would be equivalent to if we put something right where the fountain is. That's basically where this new building is. Oh, it's really close. Yeah, it's not separate. And in fact, that's one of the reasons why parishes, and it's so common now for churches to be looking at this, is that land is so expensive, and Jared really alluded to that really building anything or finding that piece of land, it's not about the thing on it, it's about how much it costs to find a place built. So next, let's go to the next slide. Can I go ahead and click again? Okay. So a couple other things that really came through a lot was obviously, as I mentioned, community input, engagement with the neighbors. Most projects have some sort of neighbor who complain, that sort of thing. And the key was to be engaged with them and talk through them. And also, your developer, can be that frontline person to talk about, because they have had all kinds of experience with all kinds of these projects. versus a parish, which is usually this is their first time doing it. And then next, other considerations, and these are just other things. Need to be transparent, make sure that the parish is tight. These are kind of things that were common to pretty much all of them. And especially the first one, which is making sure that the parish's input. Some of them had an architect in the parish who would be looking over the drawings, and a lawyer, such as JR, was really important to look over the whole legal stuff and things like that. So, next slide. So, just to summarize, we have lots of options. I know we went through a few of them, but there's lots and lots of options. To meet whatever our needs and desires are for our parish, whether it's for rectory housing, clergy housing, affordable housing, that sort of thing. And then second, they are constable. But can we do this? It's like we have seen a wide variety of different parishes, both from ones that are kind of in what I would call rural areas, meaning it's like it's a crazy expensive, huge campus, to more of city urban, and they all manage to do something. So it's pretty amazing. Yeah.
Is that rectory and affordable or rectory or?
No, and
Okay.
both of them should be are possible here without losing our character. It's just a matter of what we want and how we want to do it. Okay. In short, we've learned a lot. So it's kind of said. I encourage you to reach out to any of us if you want to get more information. And of course, we have all of our minutes from all our meetings, so if you guys are really want to dig deep into it, we can review all that information as well. Okay, next I'm going to pass it over to Judy, who's going to talk about St. Jude's in particular.
I wanted to talk a little bit about the history of our property here at St. Jude's. 60 years ago, founding members of St. Jude's celebrated in the farmhouse, I think this is Easter Sunday, in the middle of an apricot orchard. And over the years, many physical changes have taken place on our little 3-acre property. The first change was the building of the original church, which was intended to be used as a parish hall after the church was placed on the corner where the apricot orchard is now. It was decided not to do this so that the church could focus more on outreach to the community, which was very important to them. And so they decided to stick with this as the church combination with the parish hall. If you, let's see, yeah, if you noticed in the last picture, there were a lot of children, so next slide. But anyway, there's no picture of the church still being developed. I guess it was kind of an afterthought, but I think that came next. And then in 1982, the parish decided to change the church so that it was less of a parish hall and more of a sanctuary. The original church faced the apricot window and was long and straight. It had no narthex, and walked straight right into the back of the church. It had polished cement floors, and it was very basic. So in 1982, the center of the church was pulled out, the seating was changed 90 degrees, and in the bump out on the west, we placed the altar, and in the bump out on the east became the narthex. The ceiling was also vaulted in the middle, but the two wings are pretty much as they were for the original church. Go ahead. 3 years later, with a giant work party over several weekends, which is one of the most enjoyable things I've done in St. Jude's. We had so much laughter and so much community. It was wonderful. But we replaced an old slide and a swing set and a chain link fence with nice playground equipment, some brick patio that we did ourselves, and also an iron fence.
Where was it?
It's still in the same.
Where the basketball court was.
Let's see. You can go again. In the early 1990s, outside the church, we made a memorial garden. And this garden, received members of St. Jude's who passed away. But recently it was changed to add a cross from St. Mark's as well as symbolic soil from their Memorial Garden to include them in our church when their church closed. Okay. Tired of constantly moving heavy pews for every parish event, the parish added a lovely parish hall. And I think this was 1996.
Yeah.
And so you can see the construction and the actual parish hall as it looks now, I think, but originally there was just grass landscaping outside, and if you go to the next slide, you can see that in that section was parking. So you park right in front of the parish hall and right in front, well, there's a lawn in the park in front of the parish hall and right in front of the farmhouse. Now with the next upgrade, we changed and it had a beautiful landscaping where we can have outside services under the trees. And we have the fountain and the labyrinth. Okay, next slide. Most recently, the playground was again upgraded to have a climbing structure, a little swirly thing, a bocce ball court, a little fountain, and a lovely oak tree that's grown as we speak. I've only mentioned property changes and not other changes to the property, to the church, because technically we're talking about property changes. The original orchard property has obviously seen many changes over 60-year history. Each change has been thoughtfully planned to maintain the pastoral feel of the property. The next change we are considering is the addition of clergy housing and affordable housing. In addition, the additional affordable housing element would further our ministry of helping members of the outside community. In the beginning of our housing discussions, we've considered how to add housing while keeping the pastoral feel of our campus. Some of the things we considered are replacing the church school buildings with multi-story mixed-use classrooms. Multi-story mixed-use buildings with classrooms and offices on the ground floor and housing above. The questions we got are, would the building wrap around the former view? And if it did, would it attach to the farmhouse, or would the farmhouse be moved to another location on our property? Could we build behind the church school building, the one that faces, that backs onto the club? Because there's a large, hardly used parking lot back there, and go back there. Would we mass buildings, which is what architects call putting like a 2-story building to the front and a 3-story building behind that, so the mass isn't so huge, or 3-story, 4-story, depending on how you look at it. Are there other locations on campus that we could use? Perhaps behind the fireside room and have different pieces of housing located throughout the campus. Would the rectory be a single-family home or a 2-story duplex to provide housing for more than one clergy? We've also considered what population our affordable housing could serve. For example, low-income seniors, teachers who find it impossible to live in the area, emancipated foster children, because at 18 years old, they're on their own. And as we all know, we can't afford to live around here or pay rent as an 18-year-old. Or a mix of various residents. And the residents would always be vetted by the people who help us build and manage the property. As we prayerfully consider our calling and the future of our campus, you will be invited to ask questions and give your input to the process.
And that's where we're at now. So, we have a section over there and a section over here. They are the same questions on both sides, so you don't have to go to one or the other. For the online folks and for everyone here, these will also be posted in the Narthex for the next month, 2 months, with everything there as well. So if you need time to think about things in the coming weeks, feel free to ask add to them there. So these are the questions that we're going to ask you. Next. And one more. Okay. What are the current parts, or what are the parts of the current campus that you enjoy? This can be a specific thing. This can be a feeling. This can be a memory that is tied to the campus. This is a very open-ended question. So whatever current campus, what is it that you enjoy? Second question, what are your ideas for the campus? So we've talked a lot about the various things that can be done with this campus. Do you have any other ideas? Again, very open. And then the third one, if we build housing on our campus, who would you like that housing to serve? So as Judy just alluded to, we have, there are many, many different communities that it could serve. It could be mixed, senior, teacher, low income, transitional. There's a bunch of different types of housing that we could be talking about. So we want your input on what you would like to see there as well. The way this is going to work is there are post-it notes on both tables with a bunch of pens. Go ahead and write down whatever your thoughts are and then stick them on the large sticky note with those questions on them. There are also dots on the tables. So those are basically +1 dots. So if someone has already put up a sticky note that you agree with, you can just take a dot and stick it on that sticky note so that we can get kind of a sense of, one, so we don't have just repeats after repeats, but also so that we can get a sense of, how people feel about things that are already. So again, for the online folks, these will be available, and for everyone here, these will be available in the narthex for the coming month to 2 months, so that people can do stuff there. But right now, we're going to take a pause in real life, in the room, and go ahead and take some time for you all to put some thoughts up on the sticky notes. So go right ahead.
Come back. Okay.
About 5 minutes or so, 5, 10 minutes doing that, and then we'll come back to the, spend about 5, 10 minutes doing this, and then we'll come back together if there are questions in the room.
Good, how are you?
Helping this campaign
Oh yeah, awesome.
yesterday and today.
And to yesterday.
He had walkers on our front lawn to kind of go over areas to hang more hangers.
Oh, nice.
So we got some volunteers. Other than being high school students, so pretty cool.
That's awesome.
What about you? How's your weekend?
It was good. It was good. Yesterday we did we cried in the morning, and then we had a birthday party in the afternoon, and then we go to the family dinner. Some of our couple family throughout the dinner. So
Very cool.
we do dinners alternating
3 minutes.
alternating
3
houses.
minutes, and we'll gather back to
Nice. And then today we have this, and hopefully we're relaxing.
Oh goodness, okay. Whose birthday was it recently?
It was Lillian's friend in first grade, so they were in class together last year, but this year they're in second grade. We got invited.
That's wonderful.
Unfortunately, they're moving by the end of the year, I think, so that's kind of what they find out.
Out of state?
Probably, I think. Maybe they're going like Reddit or something.
What's do you know, like public housing?
Yeah, they're originally from Reading, and
Um,
she's studying nursing, so I'm not sure what she's going to be doing or what their plans are. I haven't really found out much about it, just kind of over the conversation. Yeah, they're moving.
sorry.
So I'll ask them more detail. Not from her. Where it's from?
Oh, you guys are cool now.
No, not.
Oh, you came out from okay. That's
We're in
good.
Saratoga.
Yeah.
No, unfortunately.
Well, we totally understand a lot of people don't live here because it's yeah. So,
Well, we are blessed. We're in her family, so they bought in 77.
perfect.
They retired up in the mountains, so we rent from them. We have a place, which is good because
One more minute, and we'll all gather back together.
there's nothing to do at Kaiser, so they have to use our home address for their home address.
Understood.
So they still have coverage. So they drive down and get stuff done. So it's good. It all works out. It's good for every party, both parties. So and we're doing improvements. We got an old light, we put a new fan. That's our next ceiling fan. And, so it's fun.
Yeah, we need to renovate our house. It's really old looking and we don't have a dishwasher. So that's just something. We don't have AC and heat, so
We don't have AC. We have a whole house fan that we open the windows at night.
same as us. Good catching up.
Yeah, good. Talk soon.
All right, let's gather back together. We lost a few folks, but hopefully not everybody. So if our housing folks can come on up front here, we're going to have some Q&A. Actually, we'll call it Q&R. Instead of questions and answers, they may not have answers, but they can have responses. questions and responses or reflections. That's good. So as Sarah said, these papers will be up in the narthex, and you are invited to continue to add to them in the days and weeks to come. We'd love to get your feedback. As I said at the beginning, this is an iterative process. We are gathering and learning and getting ideas. We're sharing things with the parish. We would love your ideas. The ultimate goal in this, of course, is to get as much good information that our housing folks can share with the vestry, because the vestry will ultimately be making the decision about what we do here on our campus. That's their responsibility. But they want to make a good decision, right? And they need good information. So these folks have been working really hard, and I think you've seen that today. So good job, people. Really good. To get that information. So, part of all of that process are your questions, or your ideas, or your feedback. So, right now in this moment, if you have a question, I invite you to either raise a hand, and I'll come to you, or come to this mic here in the room, and share your question. Go ahead, Kathy.
No,
I'm wondering what your ideal time frame is for making a decision.
Great, good question. Any you want to respond?
Yes.
Okay, so Kathy's question is, what is the ideal time frame? My hope is, because of the way vestries work and how a third of them change over every year, is that by the end of this vestry term, so that by the end of January, the current vestry can make a decision about the next steps. That may not be what we do, all the way to the end, but at least what's the next step. So that we don't have to start with a whole new class of vestry members and then try to bring them all up to speed and then delay the process by another 6 months. So, does that help? JR. Oh, gosh. Right.
Just to piggyback off of that, with the city's housing element process and the way that HCD interacts with cities that submit their housing element, I would expect that we'll probably go through a few rounds with the state. And we probably won't have final certification until sometime into the summer of next year, which means that our ideal window to try to work with the city's planning department is more or less in the same period of time.
Great. Thank you, JR. All right, other questions? Vance.
That microphone should be working.
Oh, it's working out. Great. Vance.
Hello. This is, not sure how to phrase it, it's kind of philosophical. The campus has evolved a lot over the years, and it's changed. I remember when I was a graduate there. And we're going to evolve going forward. But the question I'm asking is kind of philosophical. I'm trying to phrase it. What are we looking for tenants? Depending on how you define it, you could end up with a group of people who never move. Literally, they might have a choice. So would we be looking for, just some comments, something that might roll over in 3, 4, 5 years? What's the next step in evolution? Because once the community wants to open up housing, somebody moves in, they're there. Sure. What's the evolution on it?
Yeah. Great.
So again, there are a lot of options. I hate to keep using that word. But depending on who it is that we move in, that's going to determine it. There could be housing for people who are transitional. They're just coming in and housing for the first time, and they're the expectation that they would probably live on some other asset. With seniors who, there's every possibility that they will stay until they die, or have to get further assistance living or something like that. So it really depends on the population that we choose. And I would recommend that we choose who we would like as a for criteria for who we want. So if that's a concern, please put it up. if you would prefer people who are here for a long term, or if you would like people who are here for shorter terms, so there's turnover, that's something that at least that's good value input to us. Another piece of that, of course, and I think maybe behind your question, Vance, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is if there are people living here on campus, obviously that changes the sort of flow and structure of what's happening on our campus, right? So part of that then is being mindful of how we design whatever we build. And so what spaces are shared spaces, what places are not shared spaces, and how do those groups, just like during the week, when we have, if you come during the week, there are gobs and gobs and gobs of children on campus because we have different tenants who use the space during the day. So one of the ongoing challenges there, obviously they're living here, but they're here during the day, is how do we design these spaces and utilize these spaces well so that we can all do this thing together. So that's part of that process too, absolutely. Scott, great.
So first of all, I want to say thank you for doing this forum today. And, I think you all did a great job presenting different aspects and facets of the issue. I wanted to just talk about one piece of the puzzle we haven't really talked about so far, which is the tenants we currently have on campus, so the organizations we rent space to now. And as you heard me describe it at the annual meeting at the beginning of the year, that's become a very significant part of finances here, right? That supports everything we do here at St. Jude. We simply couldn't afford the expansion and staffing we've had and all the things we do on campus without that financial support. But I also want to mention, besides the dollars and cents or whatever legal obligation we have to those organizations and leases, there's the fact that we have relationships with these organizations, right? And they are nonprofit organizations doing good work in the world that we think is worth supporting. And during whatever disruption there is during construction or replacement of the spaces they're using now, if we tore down the last buildings and build something new, while they're being temporarily housed in trailers in the parking lot or whatever we do, it's going to be I think it's determinant of success here, how they feel about that process, right? Obviously we can't afford to have them decide to go off and not come back, right? So I think we need them to not only tolerate this plan, but be enthusiastic supporters. And I don't know, I think it's tough sell in some cases, right? And so I think we've got to be mindful of being minimally disruptive to those users of our campus.
Anybody want to? I have a response unless somebody else does. That's absolutely true, and I think there's two pieces of that. One, I think maybe Jennifer alluded to in terms of just our partnering, right? So how do we partner well with the organizations that we rent to now? And so not only are we bringing you all into this process, but how do we start conversations with our tenants, Live Oak, Tessellations, One Stop, our various tenants? How do we bring them into the conversation as well? Because I think the other piece of this is, yes, we want it to be, we want it to be minimally disruptive, but the other side of that is the potential for how can this enhance what they are doing, right? What if we have a conversation with Live Oak? Live Oak provides senior day citizen support, but they're doing it in a space that's not designed for seniors, right? So what might we do as a partnership where whatever space we might build, even if there's a short-term disruption, that ultimately benefits their mission and their ministry or their work as a nonprofit also. So there could be two sides to that as well. But all of that happens in conversation. None of this is, well, we're going to do this thing, good luck. But all of it's part of an ongoing conversation, so it's mutually beneficial, not just for us, but for them and for whatever we grow into. So great questions. Other questions? I'm not sure if I saw other hands. Karen, go ahead.
I'm just a visitor here, so a lot of the details behind all of this I don't know, that you're more aware of. My question that comes to my mind is, if this affordable housing effort is part of your Christian, you see it part of your Christian ministry, your Christian mission here, where you are. I'm hoping that you all will want to be involved in the process of making sure that the people who are actually on your campus, I mean, you don't want to ask them to begin with our moves, obviously, but I think you probably will want to be supportive of them, whether they're seniors or they're young people, struggling for the first time away from home or whatever it is. But it seems to me that that's what I haven't heard you talk about at all or come back around to. You started with a call from maybe Bishop Mary about this, but now you're talking so much about sort of the building and the details. And I hope that your process will come back around to that, to your Christian mission.
Absolutely. Thank you, Karen. Cal, could you shut the sliding doors? They have beautiful singing, but it makes it a little hard to hear each other. Karen, that is a great point. I've said this before in a couple different settings, but we didn't say it today. For me, and not as we've talked in our work, for me this really comes out of our baptismal covenant. When we covenant together, when someone is baptized, we renew our baptismal covenant. We strive for justice and peace. We strive to seek the dignity of every human being. And so how might we seek the dignity of every human being who is in need of housing? Right? And so what does that look like? And what part do we play in doing that? Yeah. Becky?
We've done it in the past. We've supported clergy housing, right? By finding along with clergy residences. And I guess we've decided not to do that. And I just want to hear an explanation, like, it's just way too expensive, or, yeah. So I just wanted to know here the conclusion.
So the conclusion is it's way too expensive. So we only, as here alluded to, we only have about $365,000 in a fund. That would be a significant input by a rector to be able to afford anything in this area, let alone something that could be for a family of 5. It's the fact that, as everyone else alluded to, the cost of housing is really about land. So we would be able to afford to build something that could not only work for right now, but could work for the future of whatever that looks like. And it could be large enough to serve whatever we need it to serve, because we would only be paying for the building, not the land. So if you're looking at continuing what we were doing in the past, which was a cost share, the split of that has become so unattainable in just the cost of housing in the area. I mean, you cannot find a place that is big enough for a family anywhere that is not South San Jose or East San Jose, even then, for less than $2 million. I mean, that's just.
One thing that parishioners donated to the initial chunk, and I remember he was asked.
Well, I'm just curious. Yeah. The other problem is that even if we were to get a bigger chunk, anytime we had a turnover of a rector, we have to start all over. And with housing being so, I mean, it continues to just go up, but we have no idea what the housing is going to look like in the future. It just becomes an extra burden. I mean, when we were calling Aaron, it was a huge question of, can we call someone with what we are paying in this area when we don't have a good housing solution? And so having something that it allows us to have that completely off the table in the future, that won't be a concern if we afford to do this. That won't be a concern in the future. It won't be something that we have to worry about in the future of having that additional, very heavy burden of how are we going to afford to pay this person enough to live in this area.
Anyway, I just think about it, because I'm not sure all residents would want to live on the property, and that's one thing. And I understand it's a big bonus, but also if you don't get so effectively, and if you ever want to stay in the area, and you aren't rising with the cost of housing, you're never going to go to retire. So, these are real questions, and I'm just curious the thought process that went into it.
So there's no way we could afford to, like, if that was the option that was presented to us, I would have to go for a different call.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just the reality of it. Like, that's not an option for our family. I have no intention of retiring there. I know that won't happen. Are you making a decision as a parish for future rectors and whether or not they may live on the campus? Yes, you are making that decision. But that is the decision that you can make as a parish. And I will tell you that every church who is currently in a call, if they do not provide housing, are struggling even to get people to apply.
So when we're talking about, I mean, on the slides, the rector housing and the affordable housing, are we thinking these are two new structures?
Possibly.
I'm curious, or
Sure.
are we thinking there's an apartment, the bottom floor, middle floor? I'm just curious.
Yeah, well, the real answer is we don't know, because none of us are architects. There's a lot of work we would need to do. We have talked about separate, All Souls, they have it all built together. I mean, it's definitively separate, even though it's all part of the same building. But they're in an urban setting, we're in a suburban setting. So we have talked about doing two different structures on different parts of the campus. But we kind of don't know until we get enough into the design process to even see what's possible.
Right, and we would be building the right, I mean, it's in the paper, right, so that's, that's why I mean, well, it is. Yeah, it's not. It's not. Okay, I built a house in Cupertino, and it's sort of big enough for a family of 5, and that was years ago. And, it would be $1 million now, it's my guess, because the cost of the building is very high. So that, I mean, I'm just talking about it. I'm not opposed or anything like that. I'm just curious about that's done.
In the suburban setting, there has been a presumption that church housing will be apart from structure related to affordable housing. That structure, there would be an emphasis more on accommodating tenants and accommodating our needs as a parish within that new building. In other words, common rooms and whatnot. But with the simplicity of what it's very likely that most likely that any financing plan for a rectory would be apart from a financing plan for the affordable housing. It's also very likely it could be that they're on a totally different timeline. Take much longer to do one or the other. And there are super choices for financing a rectory that St. Jude's didn't take on early on. We just had a debt for the parish hall, and because of that, went to parishioners to ask them to buy into a rectory. We don't have that debt anymore for the parish hall, and we could $375,000. I suspect that construction would be $800,000, $900,000. Probably get it done for that. That means that we'd be taking out a mortgage for $300,000, $40,000, which would be a very doable kind of thing, I would think, for the parish going forward. So it's an opportunity to be more flexible and take advantage of some of these resources that are out there that support these
Sorry, I just want to make one more point. In talking about the rectory, we have putting it somewhere where it could be kind of wall off is the wrong term, but have a private area where it wouldn't feel like you step out your door and there's a parishioner there asking questions. We had thought about how we can make it, the same but apart, where there would be a feeling that you're not constantly looking, that you do have a space that's room for the record. So.
All right, first thing. As Sarah was saying, for example, a lot of people have said, well, couldn't we just renovate the farmhouse and, turn it into a rectory? And I personally wouldn't want to have my front door open right here. And I think it would be really hard for a future rector to say, and I don't know if engineer wants to be the rector, to do that. So we have to be thoughtful in whatever we go from a rector standpoint. The other part of it that I really want to mention, and Jared put up a really telling graph, was what is considered, median incomes for the local area, and for the family of 5, and what does it mean? And I don't want to fly out here, but we can't afford, and we don't pay our rectors anything that would get them to even the median income here. We just don't, and we pay better than what the diocese recommends, as we know, and we still don't. So clergy in this area, I don't know, my guess is pretty much every clergy in this area would fall under a below market rate housing. They would fit into that. They would fit the criteria. So I think of affordable housing and clergy housing kind of very similar sort of vein, because clergy falls under they need the affordable housing as much as other people. So to me, that's why I agree to make them together because of that very fact.
Well, go ahead. I was just going to throw a comment that I think in my mind, anyway, clergy fall under that category of locally desirable service and support, like firefighters and teachers and things like that. That generally do not make what you make working for the companies that make up the top tier or Fortune 500 companies. Are all headquartered here in Los Angeles, Texas. We want to support Aaron's ability, and whoever comes after Aaron, and presumably a very long time.
And the other piece that we talking about rectory housing, but we also, as we talked in the presentation, about clergy housing. So if we were to want to call an associate rector, would there be the possibility that we could provide housing for that person as well? We don't know the answer. The short story is we don't know the answer. But could we, which would then allow us, if we could, to call an associate much more feasibly than if we were to try to advertise across the Episcopal Church for an associate rector, and then they take one look at the cost of housing and they're like, no. Which is very, very possible. Lance.
I'd like to ask a common question, Aaron. In your evaluation of the choice of a parish and your decisions to move on when that time comes, I'm not claiming one or the other. What are your thoughts on how it would appeal to you to have a rectory over there or somewhere overlooking something? Because it's a nice campus, but it's not private housing necessarily, and you're in the middle of activity all day long. In your choice of where you go next, how would that rectory look to you if you were reconsidering St. Jude's?
Great question. Sort of theoretical on multiple levels. Okay, so there's two ways I'll answer the question. Based on where we have considered where we might place clergy housing, which is sort of the back corner over there, obviously not the memorial, like further the back 40 parking lot space, right? that is one place where we have talked about the possibility of where this could be, right? So as Jennifer was saying, not there, but something over out there that has a level of privacy. I think, so my wife's here, so she can speak for herself. But I think that would have been appealing to us. I looked at another parish in another part of the country, East Coast, where this sort of thing, having a rectory right next to the church, is very common, and we were open to that as possible. So that idea for me as a clergy person is appealing. My own personal philosophy of ministry, regardless of cost of living, is I would prefer to live within 2 miles of whatever church I'm serving, whether that's here in Cupertino or somewhere else. It's not so much the physical space, it's the psychological space. It's as long as there's an understanding of that's where the rector lives or that's where the clergy live, and it's only appropriate to go there in case of emergency or whatever, right? I've been in lots of churches where the rectory or the clergy housing is right next door, and I've seen it work really well. So that's not a disincentive to me, and had we been on the other side of this, would have been appealing to me. The other way I would answer the question is to say, I don't know how else to say this. I didn't think that we even had the possibility of even accepting this call because of the cost of housing. And it was only because of the generosity of this parish when I was called that we were even able to do so. Had someone said earlier, had the parish said, oh, we're going to pay the diocesan minimums, we would have had to say thank you, but no thank you. Because we couldn't have done. And so because the vestry that made the call went beyond that, we were able to do so. So, I don't know, does that help kind of frame this a little bit? Great. Grant? Oh. Okay.
So we've spoken about 2 projects, the rectory and the affordable housing, and it was suggested that these projects might take place separately. And are we in a financial position where we can run both these projects concurrently, or if we had to, is one being considered more important than the other?
So, as I mentioned, because of our land capitalization, meaning the land cost is what we would be giving for an affordable housing project. So we actually are not putting out monies for that. It would be grant monies and things like that. So obviously, we would probably want to put something into it from a standpoint of maybe we want to have better landscaping or things like that. But it wouldn't be an enormous financial outlay to us. And as Peter alluded to, a rectory would be probably a mortgage very typical financial instrument. So it is doable. And even though we can do them separately, it is possible also to combine them. And I think there's a couple of good reasons that we might want to consider that. One is that the noise and disturbance to our campus, it'll be once versus twice, which is really kind of a nice thing. The second thing would be, there's a possibility that if we could have the same builder, there might be some financial benefits to us when we're building a rectory. It's like, your equipment's already here, and they're like, okay, great, we'll just pay us for the time versus bringing everything out. And there's a possibility. Things also like sewer and things like that can be really beneficial. In fact, we found that to be the case when we put in new sewer lines, and then we built this parish hall. I can't remember, there was a TR we put in way back when, and it turned out that it was to our benefit. So sometimes there's economies of scale.
Yeah, and this was just directed at the prior question, with respect to, will we still be able to attract a new rector? Is this the type of housing that someone would want? People tend to gravitate toward the sort of housing that interests them, so the the applicants that you're more likely to see are ones who've gone, oh, they have their own housing on campus. Good, that's where I want to be. So don't think of it necessarily as a negative. It may be that you get somebody who actually wants that housing arrangement.
Steve?
Is the bond program, the church bond program that financed these buildings here, still a viable possibility? I don't know what the markets are up to these days.
Peter, you might know more about that.
Yes, it is. We've reached out to us, and they would like to have the business. So, no, they're alive and well.
It's the Episcopal Church Building Fund or something. They exist. Other questions? Good. Let us take our last question and we'll wrap up.
It's not really a question, I guess. I see the benefits of building both at the same time, but I hate to see the one delay because of the other. And maybe having the one, let's say the rectory, which is easier, simpler, it could just generate that energy, get people on board about change and productivity of it. I think it's less disruptive over there as opposed to being little. But I hate to see that delay because of the complications from the other one.
Yeah, and lots of you.
I just have one.
Sure, go ahead.
We're looking into it and having to deal with the tenants we already have, give us a little bit more time to question. I'm not sure how Touch Relations will feel about having a bunch of people that are on campus, one story off of their kids. I wouldn't be comfortable with that personally. Maybe they're different, maybe the plan is different, but it's just something to consider that, I was thinking back to it and not, it's just putting it there makes me a little.
Sure. Yeah, and like I said, we still have lots to figure out. I mean, none of us are architects. So we need to meet with architects, we are meeting with architects, we need to continue meeting with architects. They're going to have, and Judy has a great example of tell your kitchen story about how architects sell stuff that they
Oh, yeah. So years ago, we were remodeling our house, and our kitchen was stuck over a weird corner. And it was interesting to me when the architect came in, they talked about, oh, well, you could put this here, and you could do that there, and you could put your stove here. And it's like, I never pictured that. And when we first started discussing this, the only thing I could picture was the orchard, which I didn't think would go over quite a few people. But and then, Aaron said something about, oh, we could go with both of the church school buildings. It's like, oh, I never even thought about that. I mean, I think we're not architects, we just don't have that kind of vision. Yeah.
Some of the architects we've met with have said things like, well, if we were to work with you, we would come with 3 different design options. And then we could then talk about that as a parish and get people's feedback on it. Obviously, the vestry, but also as a parish. So there's a lot of that iterative sort of process when we go through, like, oh, I really like that idea, or no, that's terrible. We never want to do that, right?
I almost put this in my talk, but I didn't. But when we did the remodel of the church, we had 2 designs. And one, I don't even remember exactly what it did, but it kept the same design and somehow it ended in architects. And then that was plan A. And plan B was changing the whole church and going in a different direction and looking at different things. And I kind of thought people would go with plan A because it felt safer. But overwhelmingly, people wanted plan B because it gave us a more useful space. And so I think that might happen here. Who knows?
All right, so this has been great. You all have been awesome. Like I said, these things will be up. Please continue to give feedback. Jennifer will put the slides up on the website. Feel free to reach out to any of these folks or to myself. We want to keep talking, keep having a conversation. We will keep learning, and we will keep bringing you all up to speed as we learn more when the time is right. Thank you all. Can we give our housing group a hand? Thank you all very much.
Hey, Steve.
Right.